We have also been informed that in some states, traditional midwifery is criminalized. What measures are you taking to facilitate the practice of traditional midwifery, in particular of Black and Indigenous communities, including by removing obstructive license requirements? That would be my questions for now, and I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. Thank you. Concerning Indigenous and Black midwifery practices, I didn't hear your answer. So here is my question. What will the U.S. do to protect Black, Indigenous, and other cultural reproductive rights in childbirth, including rolling back criminalization of cultural midwifery practices? And in particular, how will it move towards exemption from licensure requirements for religious and cultural midwifery practices? Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are on the plane en route to the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, Switzerland.
Yup. Here we go.
So we are going to, Ki is going to represent Indigenous midwifery in the shadow report that was done by the Center for Reproductive Rights and many other organizations, including
Malamanapua Ohomea, Pacific Birth Collective, and 14 other organizations that signed on to support our shadow report. We filed war crimes on the United States for war crimes against women within our nation, our Hawaiian nation. And so we're going to speak to that and the injustices that continue to occur now for generations. So mahalo for holding us in your hearts, holding us in your prayers, and we'll keep you folks posted on our travels.
This flight's going to go to Los Angeles, so we're going to have some stops along the way. So we may be checking in with you guys on the stops along the way, but yeah, we'll let you know how it goes at the United Nations. We've heard that Governor Josh Green is planning to attend the Human Rights Commission, also to give a report on Maui.
And we just can't wait to see him.
And this is coming from a Maui midwife who has been assisting people at the fire relief hubs pretty much 24/7.
24/7. Been called into emergency situations for multiple situations. We pretty much have crisis all day long, and in some of the various situations we've been called into, we don't know the folks. They just know that we're down the road and we're the closest thing to them, and as opposed to giving birth on the pali, we get called in, and we've been saving lives, straight up.
And they're calling that criminal activity.
Yeah.
So that became criminal activity as of July 1st this year. So to be an Indigenous midwife is apparently criminal. Unfortunately, we haven't had our compatriot organizations supporting us as much as we would like, and we would like to ask people in the community to please request that the community support us more, because we know that
we're the ones on the ground doing the work.
The grassroots supports us.
Collaborative care is what we need, not exclusion. Yeah, exclusion doesn't make anything safer, and we're still the ones they're gonna call, regardless of what your laws look like. And so we're just here to also remind you that, quite honestly, there is no jurisdiction. But we're going to continue to fight so that we also have recognition of that and all the other aspects that need to be recognized.
So mahalo, everybody, and please stay tuned. We'll let you know how it goes.
We'll be on the way here shortly.
And,
4 hours, 55 minutes, wheels up.
Aloha.
Ahiho.
Overall, should be a pretty good ride, maybe a few bumps here and there.
Aloha kakahiaka, I think.
Aloha, everybody. We made it to Geneva.
We just made it.
And we are now in the very long line for passport visa. You know that's stamping. So yeah, it takes a little bit. There's there's a lot of action over here. So part of this trip, part of the many things we're doing here is a tutorial for more Kanaka Kiai to be able to come to these international venues. So our review of the Geneva airport is a beautiful, very modern airport, very long walk.
All glass.
All glass.
Shiny.
The walk is very, very long. So just note if
We have
you...
a mountain view.
A beautiful mountain view. Oh, yeah.
Can we
Where's
flip them?
Yeah, trying. Okay.
Nani, no.
Yeah, beautiful mountains. Oh my goodness. So beautiful. You know, the whole thing is on a lake. Super awesome. But yeah, so this is our on the way to the UN. Just pulled in at the airport, doing the whole thing. Yeah, and this is our tutorial. So, you know, you gotta do this step, which does take a lot of walking and hauling and stuff. And it was a 7.5-hour flight from New York, which was the third
leg.
Yeah, that this was the third leg, right?
Yeah,
of the
leg.
So we flew to Los Angeles and then to New York, and now we're
From Maui to LA, LA to New York, New York to Geneva.
yeah, and we're here. We made
I
it.
can't believe it's happening.
Yeah. So we will we're almost through this line, so we'll check out now. But yeah, that's our manao, and we'll see you soon. Okay, ahui ho. And we are leaving the Geneva airport and walking. We're gonna go try to walk through this neighborhood, see if we don't get lost. And just giving everybody a little bit of sight. Whoa, pretty intense. Okay, let's pause momentarily up here just to make sure I got the directions right. Okay. Okay. And I think we're going through this little trail in the woods. I don't know. Do you think that's too rough? I think that's the trail we have to take. I think so.
Let's double check where we're going.
Okay, I'm gonna sign off. Aloha, everybody. We are, we just picked up our security badges at the, at the United Nations,
Aloha.
Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So they did manage to find our badges, even though
We're
they seem-
approved.
they seem to have a problem with your okina. Yeah, they didn't
We're
understand.
trying to understand the
okina.
okina in Haho Ohano Hano, but we got it.
Yep. So this is the, in our tutorial. So to be part of the 139th session, for the, the Human Rights Committee. Everybody's got to come down here, which is kind of a little far from the main UN headquarters, to their security office, the Palais Wilson, and pick up their security badges. And so this is part of the whole security process. Tomorrow morning we are going to be back, but this is our mission for today.
For today, yeah. Still never sleep for a couple of days, but we got our passes.
We were just on the
we can go
plane
home.
for 2 days, so we'll be back tomorrow morning. Okay.
Yeah, love you guys.
Aloha. Huyo. Aloha, everybody. I thought I would just give a little update. It's just me right now. I'm walking across, kind of like across Geneva to the place where we're staying on the other side. But it's been very interesting. I just wanted to give a little update. It turns out we're gonna do a little presentation tomorrow morning as part of the ICCPR, the International ICCPR, Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And there's going to be 2 different slots because one of them is the Center for Reproductive Rights, who we're working with, is able to have a slot, 2-minute slot, and we were given 2 minutes also by an awesome coalition of indigenous organizations, the Indigenous Peoples Working Group, who are, there were some wonderful sisters from Guahan and Turtle Island who are yielding some of their time to us to be able to address some of these things. So we're going to be able to do that tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to stream it because it is highly controlled. The cameras inside the UN for some parts of it are really highly controlled, and this is one of those parts where we're not going to be able to go live, basically. But we are planning to give some report on how that goes. It's pretty interesting because this all happened kind of accidentally. You know, we arrived and we went down to go pick up our badges, which was the last live stream. We had to catch an Uber down there and to the Palais Wilson UN security office, and then we went to go find something to eat and had a little bit of a hard time doing that, but eventually ended up in this cafe that didn't have food because of a bunch of things. And in that cafe, at the bus stop, in that cafe, there were the Indigenous Peoples Working Group happened to be having a meeting, and they heard us talking and they were like, "Hey, you're from Hawaii, aren't you?" These were Chamorro sisters who'd travel all the way from Guahan, who just happened to recognize the way that we talked as Kanaka. So they had us come and talk to them, and then they ended up giving us some of their time to basically raise this issue, and it all kind of worked out perfectly because it fits in the stuff that they're raising. So anyway, I guess I'm giving this report because I want people to kind of know how stuff works for these things. This is specifically over the Human Rights Committee and the Human Rights Committee and Council and the ICCPR, the International Covenant, or also Committee of Civil and Political Rights. And those are places where the United States, and specifically Dr. Governor Josh Green, will be presenting to as well in his own time. There's a time when the states present, and they have actually asked him for a report on the Maui fires, and it'll be interesting to see what he says. Now that, I don't think we're able to tape that either, but we are able to, there should be a link, an official link, and I'm hoping that that we're able to share that, to find it and share it. Things are kind of confusing. I mean, that's one thing about this whole process, is that it's a little bit, it's a little confusing. It's not super easy to figure out on the ground, but then again, it's doable, you know, it's stuff that we can figure out. I mean, and basically when it comes down to it, we're addressing indigenous midwifery as, you know, the criminalization of indigenous midwifery as the primary, it's the tip of the iceberg, basically, right? And it's also the tip of a lot of other people's icebergs, because it's happening all over the place, and it's very, very important. We're talking about birth and sovereignty at birth, and women's basic rights, or the rights of people who give birth. You know, it's really, really important. And then we're also needing to address the deeper issue, which is, of course, where all of this colonial oppression comes from, which is the illegal occupation of Hawaii. So it's oh yes, mahalo Luella, I see that. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's you know, where we're going to try in a very small windows of time to address those things. Of course, just like our hearings at home, the hearings are not really for the people holding the hearings, right? I mean, we know that, right? If they were, we would have given up a long time ago, because, you know, the people's ability to listen or actually do something from what they listen to is very limited. But the ability to connect with each other, the ability to be to raise things in reference to international standards, in reference to history in which we have played a role. You know, I mean, here we are in Switzerland, the most famous neutral country in the world. You know, who else was the most famous country, neutral country in the world? Yup, Hawaii. And we still are. Yeah, we are a neutral country under an illegal occupation. And it might not look like a brutal occupation because the guns might not be visible and the brutality might not be visible, largely because they have successfully brutalized people already into forced compliance with their colonial exploitation and abuse, right? I mean, I think we kind of all know that, right? So basically, we need to emphasize how important it is to return our country, return our sovereign country, not some quote-unquote nation that is subservient to the guys with the guns. No. Ole. We're looking for a change in the world paradigm, and it starts with the simple thing, the right to practice ancient cultural practices that specifically carry on and bring forth new generations in ways that are sovereign. That's where this starts. It's not like I'm going to be able to squeeze everything into 2 minutes, but this is important, and we will be looking for further opportunities to address these things. And really the large part of what it's about is diplomacy with all of the other countries of the world, because you know what? We're not the only ones who are really tired of the United States and their stuff that they keep doing. I mean, honestly, it's bad. And a lot of countries of the world are sick of it. And we're sick of it. We've had enough. And they've had enough. And we need to collectively decide that it is time to take the power away from the United States and put it into the hands of the indigenous people. And not only the United States, but all the colonizers. All of the huge colonizer countries that are running the world right now. I mean, really, in one point of view, the United Nations is basically united colonizers. I mean, seriously, there's a lot of countries there, a lot of smaller countries that are represented, and that is awesome, but they're not equal. They are not equal, and it's not fair, and it's not able to shift those things that really need to be shifted. And what's really happening, the real work that's being done, is that we need to connect with each other, right? We need to connect with some of those smaller countries, with even some of the bigger countries, but the really conscious people in the bigger countries, but largely with the people, of the indigenous nations, of the unrepresented different peoples, of all of the people. Try look at these buildings. They're so pretty in Geneva. I just want to show everybody. This is what a Geneva building looks like as opposed to what we have in Hawaii, you know, when this is like in Switzerland. Like it's not supposed to be all that easy to grow all of this, you know, but they do. And there's a lot of thought put into like the way that the city looks, you know. I just wanted to point that out as a side note, you know. It's very interesting. It's also really interesting to see the very high security that just like the guys I passed by that are in some parts of it. And you know what, that is part of neutrality. It's part of being able to be neutral, is also being able to protect yourself without invading others, without aggression. And that's the thing. If you have aggression, you are not a neutral country. If you know, basically make stuff up like, oh, well, we gotta invade those guys because, you know, they're dangerous and they might bomb us or whatever. Yeah, that's bullshit. And we need to call it out, and we need to replace it with real security. So it's very interesting over here in Geneva. You know, you see a lot of there's a lot of like beautiful areas. You know, the city, this is like in the middle of the city, right? But it's like so many trees, and you know, just a lot of incorporation of nature and buildings and stuff. It's not all like that. I mean, some of it is pretty cement, but there's a lot of it, and it's kind of just even the cement parts is like there's just a lot more thought put into the way things are, and it's not such an assault on people all the time. You know how in Hawaii, like, man, you look at buildings and they look like they're out to get you. I mean, like, no joke. They're like, here we are, and F you all, you know? I mean, it's like, that's like literally how they look, you know? But here it's a little different. It's always a little challenging because learning the rules and the practices of a different place is always a thing. You know, I gotta figure out how to convert francs, and I don't speak such good Francais, but you know, that's mostly what they speak over here, mostly French in the city. So it's pretty bad. Look at these. Aren't they so pretty? It's like really kind of amazing. But and it's like, hey, you can live off of the weeds. There's like a lot of edible weeds and plants and stuff around. But anyway, so I just wanted to kind of give that update. But basically, you know, part of what I'm trying to do here is to encourage our lahui to do more in these kinds of forums, you know? I mean, it could be any of us. We could be addressing any issue, but we have to be for real aloha aina ku'e, not like selling our country out to America and compromising. Because if you're going to compromise, I'm going to ask you to please stay home, because we don't need that. And also, if you're going to get really angry and you know, and vent, this is not the place for that. It's a really good place for real making really important connections, for the actual changes that need to take place. And I think that there is a lot of opportunity to do that. I'm going to close with this shot of these weeds over here. Then there are a bunch of edible things that you might want to look at. See, that's an edible dock. There's like all kind of different, I think there's some gobo. There's all kind of dandelions. There's like lots and lots of things, and this is not that I would eat it because this is right alongside the road, but I'm just giving an example. The clovers, you know, there's all kinds of things, and this is true all over the world, yeah. But here in Switzerland, I'm just always awed by the plant people in any new place I go, you know, and just love to see all of these beautiful guys. So mahalo everybody for tuning in, and I will be in touch soon. Mahalo. Aloha kako. My name is Laulani Teal. I am a Kanaka Maoli mother, La'aulapa'au, birth keeper, cultural peacemaker, and community organizer from Hawaii. I am here with respected rural Maui midwife, Ki Kaho'ohanohano, who has been leading cultural healing aid to West Maui since deadly fires ravaged Lahaina on August 8th. All of us have been criminalized by the state of Hawaii for continuing ancient birth practices which have been restoring health and self-determination that has been continually stolen from us since our country, Hawaii, has been under occupation by the United States. Our mothers are dying. Maternal death rates under standard care are far higher for Kanaka Pacific Islanders than any other ethnic group in the US. These deaths are preventable. The cultural care provided by traditional midwives is a proven medicine for this catastrophe, and yet we are called unsafe. Colonial erasure and control of indigenous traditions is not okay. Interference in the choice of who touches a person's body during childbirth is not okay. Indigenous people being displaced, erased, and forced into silent compliance with their own genocide is not okay. Our birthing traditions are needed to bring a new generation forward, to restore our neutral, healthy country, and bring aloha and healing to humanity and our dear Mother Earth. Mahalo.
Ki'i Kaho'ohanohano, a native Hawaiian cultural practitioner, traditional midwife, and member of the Malama Napua o Haumea and the Pacific Birth Collective. And I would encourage you all to please correct your names if I mispronounced them. It's so important to me that I get them right. Ki'i, I want to bring you into the conversation. You are known in your community in Hawaii as a traditional midwife, someone who knows a lot about pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum, and can help advise families about the unique health, nutrition, and social and cultural aspects of these experiences. Recent changes in your state's law threaten your ability to serve as this resource to your community. Can you explain to us what maternal health conditions are like where you live? And since you have this firsthand experience, how are restrictions on who can provide maternal health care impacting pregnancy outcomes and experiences, especially for Native Hawaiians?
Aloha kakou. Yeah, it's a loaded question. I also feel very blessed and humbled to be here to answer these questions, and mahalo all of you for being here to receive this information. Again, I am a rural midwife on the island of Maui. I'm gonna cry, sorry. On the island of Maui. I've been practicing in my community as a cultural practitioner of Hawaiian healing arts, including but not limited to Hano practices or birthing practices for over 20 years in my community. I'm one of the last other than just potentially helping, family members. I do help family members, but I also am open to those in my community, Kanaka, Maoli, or Hawaiian, as well as other folks. For the past at least 15 years, I have been dedicated to protecting our ability to provide these services to our people. As we begin to again, as we've seen in most of our history in Hawaii, be limited in our ability to serve our people, to care for our people in multiple facets of life. By default, I've been a part of this legislative process, attempting to create and be a part of drafting and, bring pono or restorative laws that would help us protect our ability to not just practice, but to continue to perpetuate and share the pathways of our kupuna, which have, due to colonization, almost become totally erased. This is not just in Hawaii. We see this globally within indigenous communities and those communities with Black and Brown people. We've been silenced. We've been stripped of almost everything tied to land, waters, our healing practices, and so much more. When I began this struggle to fight for our rights, it really wasn't about me at all. It was about those kupuna, those elders that came before me, that were the ones who supported me to be able to not just be a home birth mom of 5 beautiful babies born on our Aina kupuna, our traditional ancestral lands that have been taken from us as well. The fact that I live in a small Hawaiian village, Kahahulua, in Maui, just the fact that I'm able to be there is monumental. Most Hawaiians don't have access to these lands or their homes from generations, if they have homes at all. It's a really big deal after 100 years to give birth in these lands, in these ways, in ceremony, with the people that I deem fit. To have my own bodily autonomy and choices honored and respected is everything. So like I said, when I first started, it was because I wanted to protect those that came before me. Because even those who have been practicing for 30, 40 years plus would be criminalized by the law or the laws that have been presented for the past decade plus. Now they've all passed. So currently I fight for my babies, for our future generations to have the ability to know who they are as Kanaka, to be able to reclaim these traditions and live with dignity and pride for who they are, who we are. I have 5 babies. 3 of them are wahine, they're girls, and 2 of my 3 girls, they're young, but they very much want to be with me every step of the way. They want to attend prenatals, they want to go to births, they want to see the babies when they're here. They've been a part of name giving ceremonies and all these other aspects that are so vital. And, so at this point, in 2019, a law passed that makes traditional midwives illegal. It did pass with a task force. I sat on that task force, flew to Oahu, a different island, with a baby less than a year old on my own dime to participate. And after all of us, not just myself, committing to this process, the task force report, which was supposed to help us be able to incorporate all practitioners within the 3 years following the passage of the bill, was never acknowledged, never implemented. Most of the suggestions that we had put into the task force were based upon UN policy. They've never acknowledged us. They have not incorporated us into the law. And so in July, as of July 1st, 2023, I am officially illegal to practice, leaving not just myself in a place where I can easily be persecuted, not just for attending births, but even the law is so limiting, I can't even give advice. Part of a traditional system of the way things work is community claim. Yeah, I've been working for over 20 years in my community. Strong community claim. I don't have anything to do with it. It's in the doing. It's a reflection of who I've been to my community, and I don't advertise. I don't charge, and none of that matters. I can still be persecuted criminally and financially for being present or supporting families. So it affects me heavily, but even more so the families. They also, are in a position where they have limited access. In Maui County alone, it actually incorporates 3 islands. We have 1 hospital. That hospital doesn't have a NICU. People are forced to leave their homes from Maui, from Molokai and Lanai, which is considered Maui County, for care on Oahu. Being displaced from your home to give birth in another island without your support systems and your other children and all the things is very detrimental to the wellness of our people. We have high cesarean rates, and with high cesarean rates, there is actually forced sterilization that is occurring after a 3rd baby. So that evacuation, birthing, having to leave your home, compounded by not being able to have a vaginal birth after cesarean, is adding to our disparities in a terrible way. And it is us, traditional midwives, culture-based religious midwives, that fill in the gaps, especially in our rural areas, and actually enhance a heightened state of wellness, which is pregnancy, by supporting folks proactively and preventatively in their wellness. So it's really hard. Just in the short time that this law, or the exemption was lifted for us to practice since July, I had to deny every single person that's come to me for care, including people I've been there for every baby. I've seen it already affect them. They may interview other midwives, which we only have a handful of anyways, and they're just not the right fit. So they will choose to birth on their own. And even the ones that have chosen to go through the medical system and receive prenatal care through doctors and birth in the hospital have, had really terrible outcomes. And these are mommies who gave birth in 45 minutes and caught their own babies prior, multiple times. So I can see how just the uncertainty and the trauma and the lack of autonomy is already changing everything. We have the largest number of testimonies every single year at the legislature. it's very clear what the people want. They want access to care. They want to be able to choose their providers. And they don't have that choice. It's been stripped of us every time. We're railroaded and they don't listen to us. We came to the CERD and talked to, those folks before about these circumstances. We've gone to, I feel like, everybody we can go to hear our cry, and we have not been acknowledged. So here we are again. And I'm sorry, I'm a very emotional speaker. I opted not to read my stuff that I worked so hard on and just speak from my heart, because I think that's just me. So I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you sharing the message of Hawaii, who is not part of the United States. We are an occupied nation. Disparities, as we see in multiple communities throughout the United States and beyond.
What do we want? Dignity. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Dignity. When do we want it? Now. Dignity. Now. Derechos humanos. Por eso aquí estamos. Respeto, dignidad. Respeto y dignidad, nos da integridad. Respeto y dignidad, nos da integridad. What do we want? Dignity. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Dignity. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Dignity. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now. Derechos humanos, por eso aquí estamos. 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 2, 4, 6, 8. Stop the violence, stop the hate. 2, 4, 6, 8. Stop the violence, stop the hate. 2, 4, 6, 8. Stop the violence, stop the hate. 2, 4, 6, 8. Stop the violence, stop the hate. Shut it down. Shut it down. Stop the violence, stop the hate. What do we want? Human rights. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Human rights. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Human rights. When do we want it? Now. And if we don't get it, shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Now. Dignity. Now. Dignity. Now. And if we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. If we don't get it, shut it down. 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 Justice. When do we want it? Now. And if we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Por eso aquí estamos. Derechos humanos. Por eso aquí estamos. Derechos humanos. Por eso aquí estamos. Derechos humanos. Por eso aquí estamos. We want freedom. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. And if we don't get it, shut it down. 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 If we don't, 2, 4, 6, 8. Stop the violence, stop the hate. 2, 4, 6, 8. Stop the violence, stop the hate. All right, we want justice. What do we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. We.
Okay, well, there's the broken chair. All right, I'm going to, well, there's a little taste of Geneva. I'm gonna just kind of catch the scene here to kind of give an idea. So they are literally right in front of the, and here's the protection diplomatique. So these are the guys who stopped us and may or may not have been called by the U.S., which is where we came from, the U.S. mission. So here is the broken chair. All right. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay, aloha. Okay. Mm-hmm.
My name is Manika Flores. I'm deeply honored to be here today in this historic moment to represent my island Guam and my indigenous Chamorro community. Indigenous homelands and communities of color have endured unending legacies of environmental racism resulting from U.S. militarization. The U.S. military is the actor of U.S. colonization, and we cannot separate the two. We continue to suffer several ongoing indigenous and human rights violations at the hands of the U.S. military. Wherever the U.S. military touches the ground, it means devastating consequences of environmental destruction and desecration of the sacred. The ongoing hyper-militarization of the island of Guam, as well as several other indigenous lands, are in direct violation of our rights to self-determination. We need the United States to immediately begin a process of decolonization and repair for the U.S. colonies and take all effective steps necessary to end military expansion and fully demilitarize the overseas possessions or territories as a commitment to decolonization. If we look, at all of the indigenous communities represented here today, if we look at Hawaii with Red Hill, Makua Valley, Ko'olawe, if we look at Puerto Rico and Vieques, if we look at every place the United States military conducts open burning and open detonation near indigenous communities and communities of color throughout the United States. And we can also see the far-reaching impacts of U.S. militarization even outside of the country. All the way in Australia, nuclear contamination. Also in Alaska, where toxic waste is buried. The Marshall Islands, the nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands, which continues to contaminate other parts of the Pacific, including the island of Guam. And it's important to mention that even the fuel from Red Hill is going to go to the Philippines, causing more desecration in those native areas. Our communities are also dealing with PFOS and PFAS contamination. It's really important to mention that in Wuhan, there are 19 Superfund sites, and right now, over our sole source aquifer, which provides our island 80 to 95% of our drinking water, a live fire training range complex is being activated, where they will fire 7 million rounds of ammunition a year. Suzus Masi, and thank you.
Throughout the review, my colleagues and I will raise specific issues that incorporate information recently received by the committee. However, I remind the delegation that these questions complement rather than replace the list of issues prior to reporting, and we expect answers and updates to all points listed, including information on the implementation of the covenant at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as the territorial level in American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and West Island.
We have also been informed that in some states, traditional midwifery is criminalized. What measures are you taking to facilitate the practice of traditional midwifery, in particular of Black and Indigenous communities, including by removing obstructive license requirements? That would be my questions for now, and I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. Thank you.
The ICCPR just questioned the United States on the many human rights violations, one of which they listed was the criminalization of indigenous midwifery. So we're going to see what the United States' response to all of this is afterwards, but this at least gives an idea that the international community and the United Nations does recognize the criminalization of traditional midwifery as a violation of human rights, and specifically a violation of the international covenant on civil and political rights. That is the committee that is questioning the United States right now, is the ICCPR, which is the International Committee on Civil and Political Rights. And you can see many of our folks are here. Yeah, so it gives it. Hi, Ron. Ron.
Well, at least they mentioned Lahaina fires.
Yes, at least they did. Yeah, and actually, Monsieur did ask me about it, so we were able to provide specific information to the committee on the Lahaina fires and on the criminalization of indigenous midwifery, because they asked specifically about those two items.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Because I talked to Ruth this morning, you know, Ruth Bolome.
Yes.
So I tried to bring her case up, and I'll see what, you know, someone might say.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good.
Because we could send them communications tonight, too.
So Ron Barnes from Alaska, and he's been advocating for Hawaii for a very long time. There are a lot of members of the committee. There's a lot of folks here. Chief Gary Harrison has been really awesome in this. Madame Chair of the ICCPR, she's been really wonderful, and so have a lot of the committee. So anyway, I'm going to end this live stream. So
where did Kiki? Okay,
she's
so
over there. Yeah.
Jamil would like us. He's going to share the link for Google Doc.
Let me finish this.
Team get to their answers.
My name is Fanula Tessier. I'm at the Department of Justice, and I'll turn to my colleague at the Department of Education.
The Department of Justice.
Mayor Reed. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Department of Health and Human Services.
Education. Justice again.
Justice.
In HUD.
This is all I had time to say, but thank you all for all you continue to do. My time is up.
Justice again.
Defense.
Turn now to my fellow colleagues. Services,
Justice,
Protection.
Interior,
DHS, Michelle Brené.
Wanted to just mention that today.
Justice. I see that my time is up, and so I think that would conclude our answers to.
Concerning indigenous and black midwifery practices, I didn't hear your answer. So here is my question. What will the U.S. do to protect black, indigenous, and other cultural reproductive rights in childbirth, including rolling back criminalization of cultural midwifery practices? And in particular, how will it move towards exemption from licensure requirements for religious and cultural midwifery practices? Thank you.
El siguiente orador es el señor So. Adelante, por favor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, delegation, for your answers and keeping time. However, I'm very surprised, actually very disappointed, that I didn't get any replies to my questions. I'm the person who raised the questions at first, and I cannot repeat all the questions. But I'm really surprised. I don't know. I don't understand what happened. But I don't think we have enough time to get answers. But I really wish you provide answers tomorrow morning. If not, in writing. I name a few. I asked question about NHRI, question about death penalty, many questions in death penalty, and also your positions on optional protocols and ratifications, and domestic violence also. So, and I'd like to take this opportunity to add one more question in regards to death penalty. Civil society shadow reports have noted that death by incarceration continues to disproportionately impact Black and indigenous peoples in the United States. Can the state party describe what it's doing regarding life sentences for political prisoners? In particular, the case of indigenous political prisoner Leonard Peltier, who was served 48 years in prison and is now 70 years old. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Both ICE and CBP have
Violence and excessive violence from cops to communities, chokeholds of the type that have led to deaths. We have enacted our own pattern and practice law that allows my office to be engaging in discriminatory practices against particular communities in our neighborhoods.
But for context, there are over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, and so excessive use of force requires a multi-pronged strategy.
At this time, I want to reiterate the Biden-Harris administration's deep commitment to protecting and advancing
excessive use of force.
No force in history has been more committed.
My name is Lynn Grasso, and Mr. So, you asked a very important question.
10 minutes remaining. Thank you.
There were a number of questions directed to the Department of Justice, and unfortunately,
There's much more that we could say.
Thank you.
Yeah, the questions were exciting. The answers kind of sucked.
Absolutely. I think that's probably what I expected. Then the fact that that is it.
Yeah, you didn't answer my question. I know, that was so good. So good.
Yeah, there's that feels validating.
Yeah.
Like we're never going to get.
And I feel like this is good evidence.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good morning to all present here, and we really hope that it will be a good morning on Earth. Madam Chairperson, according to the right of life, Article 6 of our covenant, I ask you please to allow that we have a minute of silence for all the civilian victims that we are keeping on losing every day since 10 days. People in hospital, among them hospitals, schools, among them elderly, women, and children. So please allow for this minute of silence for all those civilian victims.
Muchas gracias. Sé perfectamente de la afectación de los colegas miembros del comité.
Thank you. We would like to take this opportunity to finish
The United States. I'll now pass justice.
Thank you, Justice General Ford.
General Ford.
I think we're going to have to stop there.
I look forward to more specific answers this morning. Thank you.
Address these obstacles, directly engage with my and my colleagues' very specific questions. Thank you.
First, on the issue of demonstrations. The committee remains very concerned about the large amount of state laws that severely restrict the right to protest, which of course mostly affects people who question the status quo and aim for political or social changes. My first question is, what measures has the state party taken to ensure that broad anti-protest laws do not unjustifiably limit freedom of expression and freedom of assembly? Following my colleagues, we've received disturbing information on the excessive use of force by law enforcement during peaceful protests, but also surveillance, arbitrary arrest, and mass detention of peaceful demonstrators. Excessive force is also used by private military and security companies, for instance, against indigenous protesters. Which measures has the state party taken, and to what extent has it set concrete targets to eliminate the excessive use of force by public as well as private actors against protesters, but also against journalists, legal observers, and paramedical teams? The committee would like to reiterate its question about the necessity of the 1033 program, which enables local law enforcement to obtain military equipment from the Department of Defense, as well as about the proportionality of the use of military equipment, such as armored vehicles, during demonstrations. The committee was informed about anti-terrorism laws that have serious impact on the right to freedom of assembly, labeling protesters as terrorists and charging them as such, even though their actions are not related to terrorism. Indigenous protesters and environmental activists have also been called eco-terrorists and charged under so-called critical infrastructure laws, which have proliferated across the USA. These laws create new criminal offenses and dramatically increase penalties for participating in protests, thereby stifling environmental and climate justice movements. How does the state party ensure that counter-terrorism laws and critical infrastructure laws fully comply with the ICCPR, and that such laws are not abused to suppress lawful and peaceful protests related to political, religious, social, and environmental movements. Finally, last but certainly not least, Issue 29 on the rights of indigenous peoples. The State Party has informed the committee about laws, policies and measures in relation to indigenous and tribal peoples. The committee wishes to reiterate that the right to self-determination and the right to culture as laid down in the ICCPR and the principle of free, prior and informed consent should be at the heart of all these laws, policies and measures. For all indigenous and tribal peoples, including those living in Puerto Rico and the Guam territories. The committee unfortunately continues to receive information about the lack of protection of indigenous and tribal land, waters and sites. There are persistent problems of desecration, contamination, lack of access and destruction of ancestral lands and sacred sites due to urbanization, extractive industry, military infrastructure, agricultural business, sports and tourism. Indigenous peoples disproportionately suffer from adverse environmental and health effects caused by toxic waste and pollution, produced by, for instance, uranium and mineral extraction and processing nuclear waste. Which measures has the State Party taken to effectively protect indigenous sacred sites and places of cultural, spiritual, or religious significance? And how does it safeguard that protection covers activities by public as well as private actors? How does the State Party ensure that permissions for economic and development projects are subject to consultation and the free, prior and informed consent of the peoples affected? Is the State Party consistently conducting an environmental and socio-economic impact assessment prior to the planning of these activities? And which measures does the State Party take to ensure that bilateral treaties with indigenous peoples are actually respected? In its dialogue with the CERT, the State Party acknowledged the lingering legacy of displacement of Native Americans and the enslavement of Africans. Could the State Party inform this committee on efforts to establish study commissions, truth or reconciliation commissions, or any other initiatives to address the legacies of colonialism and slavery? The committee appreciates the adoption of legislation concerning missing and murdered American Indians and Alaskan Natives. Unfortunately, the committee still receives information on high numbers of violence against indigenous women and a lack of resources that hinders effective investigation and processing of cases, which contributes to a general feeling of impunity. Could the State Party indicate how it aims to make real progress in the combat against violence against indigenous women? Has it set explicit targets for itself? How does it guarantee sufficient resources and ensure that proper investigations are conducted into all situations of missing and murdered women and that perpetrators are tried? Which measures is it taking to guarantee that victims and their families have access to justice, including information and legal aid? How does the State Party effectively promote cooperation between tribes and law enforcement agencies? And how are law enforcement officials working with victims and families trained? And finally, how does the State Party address the root causes of violence against indigenous women, such as gender and indigenous stereotypes, biases, and discrimination? I very much look forward to your answers. Thank you very much.
In the interest of time.
Thank you, distinguished members of the committee.
With that, let me please DOJ.
DOJ.
Interior.
Deputy Solicitor Anne Marie Bledsoe Downs.
For additional comments. The history of the legacy of colonialism is the nation-to-nation relationship, DOD.
Thank you. You mentioned Guantanamo Bay. The facilities at Guantanamo amount to cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment under international law. Guantanamo Bay, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment and punishment for any reason. Guantanamo, Such treatment is prohibited under both international and U.S. domestic law. Guantanamo Bay. The Department of Defense detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Guantanamo facility. Guantanamo facility. Guantanamo Bay facility. Guantanamo Bay, Joint Task Force Guantanamo, and Justice.
Deprived human contact, General Ford. Department of Interior.
The Department released Volume 1 of the report on May 11th, 2022, which is publicly available. For over 150 plus years, Department adjusts.
Next question. Labor. Unions and workers' rights. The statute requires the government to notify any person whose communications were subject to collection if the government seeks to use the evidence against them in a legal proceeding. Security.
Security.
Identifying a public health extremism community. And we will continue to work every day to prevent it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass.
I think we're over time. We are out of democracy.
Finish us out with 30 seconds on freedom of assembly.
Excessive use of force, enforcement, excessive use of force when it comes to peaceful protests. Thank you.
The State Party did not respond within the report to the committee's question on the status and number of habeas corpus petitions filed on behalf of detainees before federal courts. You can please use this opportunity and give us the answer to the question, what is the number and the current status of habeas corpus petitions? Thank you.
Could the delegation also clarify whether there are any plans to create comprehensive privacy legislation and/or an independent privacy or data protection agency at the federal level? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the delegation. I did not obtain responses to all my questions, but of course there will be the possibility to do so in writing. And on some issues I did receive some answers, but they were somewhat broad. So for instance, on indigenous peoples' rights and violence against indigenous people, I appreciate that there's laws and commissions and reports and an awareness day. But I also acknowledge that you involve indigenous peoples in many of these activities. But how will you ensure that meaningful and robust consultation is not a restrictive interpretation of the principle of free, prior and informed consent, as it is also recognized in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which is supported by your country? I would also like to have more concrete information on situations where these laws and policies were actually effective and made a decisive difference in the reality on the ground. How have you effectively protected the rights of indigenous peoples, for instance, in relation to Cop City, the Dakota and Sands Pipeline, or the Black Hills, including their right to peaceful protest without fear of intimidation, arrest, physical injury, or murder? For instance, also on the training of law enforcement, it will be my final question. Could you be more concrete? Is this training compulsory or voluntary? Do you have data that demonstrates the results and effectiveness of these kind of trainings? I thank you for now.
What is the number and the current status of habeas corpus petitions? Thank you.
La participación, algo de las respuestas.
Thank you very much for the responses received thus far. But I cannot ignore the impact on the human rights of civilians in places of combat and conflict. And I am curious about the response of the Biden administration to the violence that we have seen, for example, in Ukraine as of 2022 and the most recent conflagration between Israel and Palestine. My question to the delegation, I don't know whether they'll be able to respond today, is can the world look forward to a declaration of peace and the suspension of military aid, a gesture of peace, the suspension of military peace by the Biden administration? I'd like to be able to ask this question.
We'll begin.
I will now turn it over to
the issue of prison labor.
The 13th Amendment and its prohibition against slavery, with the exception being unless you've been convicted and incarcerated. Please pass this on to GHS, who will, to EPA.
An action plan. It's important to note that we have been deployed in Indian country. We are committed to working with our partners and ensuring that their telescope being constructed in Hawaii are protected.
Of crime.
Security.
With that, one more from the Department of Labor.
Very well. With indulgence, then, I will speak to the issue of midwifery. I believe that's how you pronounce it, and doulas. Regarding midwives, it's important to note that Nevada is desperately lacking fully integrated midwifery care and has not been able to create a licensing scheme to ensure public protections and funding for expectant persons who desire to utilize midwifery services. However, certified nurse midwives are recognized in Nevada under Nevada law, and they are regulated by the State Board of Nursing, and they're advanced practice registered nurses who have completed specialized training. According to Nevada State Board of Nursing, its annual report last year, however, there were only 10 certified nurse midwives in Nevada. There have been recent legislative attempts nobody's to establish a licensing board for certified professional midwives, which is a new provider type that would allow for midwifery services to be covered by the state Medicaid reimbursement. These, unfortunately, have failed. Now, I will close by highlighting, however, that we are nonetheless taking significant actions to reduce maternal mortality and morbidity of women of color, particularly black women who have a higher rate of mortality and morbidity. Our state legislature has created several programs that have been successful at doing that, and we are proud of that progress we're making, but we have a long way to go, and we will continue working in that particular arena. So thanks for indulging me for a couple of minutes to discuss midwifery and doulas, and I turn the mic back. Thank you so much.
No. Fail.
Madam Chairperson, distinguished members of the committee, representatives of civil society, and my colleagues, thank you for the important dialogue we have shared over the last 2 days. It has been my honor to lead the U.S. delegation and to share this dais with Mr. Justin Vail, the Special Assistant to President Biden for Democracy and Civic Participation on the Domestic Policy Council, Ambassador Robert Gilchrist, the State Department's Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, and my Acting Deputy Permanent Representative, Bronca Bell. The composition of our delegation and our engagement with the committee are a true indication of the seriousness with which the United States takes our obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We as a delegation and the Biden-Harris administration as a whole are committed to and passionate about respecting and protecting the rights enshrined in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights without distinction of any kind. As I said yesterday in my opening remarks, our commitment to the ICCPR is a moral imperative at the very heart of our democracy and our pursuit of a more perfect union. I sit in this remarkable room on a regular basis, representing the United States at the UN Human Rights Council. Just as we have during this dialogue, the U.S. leads by example through our transparency, our openness, and our humble approach to our own human rights challenges. You have heard over the past 2 days about many of the concrete ways we are meeting our obligations under the Convention, and you have also heard our pledge to do more. The standards we set for ourselves and strive to achieve, centered on robust civil society engagement, are a cornerstone of the strength of our nation. We are grateful for the many thoughtful and probing questions from this committee, which we recognize were also informed by the critical contributions of civil society. Their engagement with us, not just this week, but through months of consultations and continuous dialogue, and the shadow reports submitted to this committee have sharpened our focus on these very challenging issues that are of pressing concern to us all. I recognize that the topics raised are often painful for all of us to discuss, and I am grateful to everyone in this room, committee members, civil society, and members of my delegation for your participation. In closing, as I said at the outset, we take great pride in our strides forward and acknowledge our areas for improvement. The United States is dedicated to that task. It is at the core of who we are as a nation. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Head of Delegation. And we are making an effort to contribute to peace. I thank you once again.
Muchas gracias. Ahiege, wado wadoe, sik sima sik tok, mahalo nuiloa.
I thank you.
Yak mag yak ye. Espero me disculpen la pronunciación.
Including in my own Guarani language. Thank you very much. I wish you a good journey home. This brings to an end meeting number 4051 of the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations.
I did too. I'm like shaking. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know. Do you want to get before she? Oh crap, that's it. Before is that it? Yeah.
That was very hard to hear. It was a bunch of bullshit.
We're not American.
Okay, well. That was a lot of bullshit. And, fortunately, there was some good questions and some awesome work by our folks, but some really, really horrible action on the part of the USA, whose answers were so terrible. We'll have to figure out strategically what to do with those. So that should be fun, and they'll be available to all you folks too for any strategies you may have. So feel free to quote or use any of this stuff in what that you're doing. If nothing else, we've got really good evidence for how the United States does not support human rights. Okay. So with that, I'm going to end, and we'll talk, and we'll be back. Okay, aloha. Hola, hola. La récupération soit plutôt
Whoops.